I think we're going beyond a VUCA world. And Minister, while you have said that we're entering a multipolar world, I would just add to your correct characterization of the emergence of a multipolar world and saying we're entering an unprecedented era of geopolitical rivalry, instigated in particular by Western powers who feel that their hegemony is under threat. Whether that will result in an outright full-scale war, including the unthinkable madness, mutual assured destruction through nuclear weapons, chairperson, one thing is for certain, Africa will become the playground for proxy wars by these great powers, and we have to address the issue of African unity, agency, setting the agenda, and being able to ward off some of these things. Right. Let me now come to some examples. I can hear the footsteps of Ambassador. You are certainly not doing that to music. So, some examples of our achievements in foreign policy. When the New World Order was declared by the US, and by the US in particular, South Africa did an assessment by the time President Mbeki took over, assessing the New World Order. Many of you were there, and actually identified some salient aspects of this New World Order. But no sooner had South Africa declared its human rights foreign policy and elevated human rights as a pillar, then we were already under scrutiny for our relations with enemies of democracy: Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, Russia, just to mention a few. Our relations with Zimbabwe, China. Here's the interesting thing. One of the other pillars of President Mandela was universality. We reserve the right to be friends with whichever country we would like to befriend. There came a fundamental change under President Mbeki. A modus operandi, a different modus operandi. One that said, to quote former Minister Alfred Nzo, we cannot stand on the rooftops and shout human rights. And what was fascinating about those reviews, you were there, Ambassador Kingsley, many of you were there. The idea was not whether you promote human rights, but how you promote human rights. Because in this world of human rights, and this is a key point I want to make, the human rights debate is no linear debate without contradictions. There are issues of relativism, of liberal democracy, of particularism, of cultural dimension. So the question was how you navigate yourself in human rights, in the world of human rights politics. To quote just something that I came up with this morning, South Africa came to the conclusion that you cannot be an opponent and a condemnator, but you also want to be in the middle of resolving conflicts. So the dominant ethos of our modus operandi in promoting foreign policy, rightly or wrongly, it's for you to judge whether it was the right thing to do, was to approach it behind the scenes where you have frank conversations, sometimes cordial conversations, with parties that you are at odds with. I would be the first to say, in this Orwellian world, the bigger you are, the more difficult it is to have a tougher conversation. And the smaller you are, the easier it is to have a more frank, direct conversation. poor Lesotho, so far from God and so close to South Africa. But let me begin to round off with a number of hopefully takeaways, Excellency. One of the greatest achievements of South Africa in the realm of foreign policy was what my former colleague and mentor, Professor Geldnys, called a norms entrepreneur. I call it norms champion. So whether it's in the continent of Africa, whether it's in multilateral fora, Minister, South Africa has been in the forefront, in shaping debates that will move the normative dimensions on human rights forward. I can go to the list without looking at my notes. The Constitutive Act of the African Union, human rights is contained in it. APRM, human rights is contained in it. NEPAD, human rights is contained in it. Pan-African Parliament, human rights is contained in it. Every time we sat on the 2 terms of the Security Council, we would actually have our president attending the sessions in order to shape the debate by taking on, particularly these unelected 5 permanent members and other members of the United Nations in order to move the debate. We should not underestimate the normative revolution that South Africa has helped to bring about in world affairs on the area of human rights. That said, the proof of the, custard, I suppose, is the proof of the custard is in the implementation. And the onus is not just in South Africa, it's on the entire African continent. And I would be the first to say to you, one of the contradictions in Africa, we sign up to these instruments, but in practice, we approach the world through realist lenses. We cling to our national sovereignty. Another one, and some of them are sitting here, one of the innovative instruments we've used in human rights promotion was envoys, special representatives, particularly to the Great Lakes region, other countries of the world, using Sherpas. I'm now concluding. We've had some major setbacks. There is no doubt about that. And no guess for thinking what some of those are. The al-Bashir matter really set us back, and the handling of it, particularly as a signatory to the ICC. And I hope we've learned lessons now that we've decided, we went to the phase where the governing party, then we leave, then we don't leave, and then we think we're going to leave, and then we're not going to leave. And now that we've taken Israel to the ICC, I hope that debate is now settled, that we belong to the ICC, and will try and influence the ICC from the outside. So serious was the al-Bashir matter that people said we might be moving into a post-human rights era. Last 2 points. The second setback, whether we like it or not, but something positive came out of it. The Lady R saga was really a turning point for South Africa. The threats from the United States in particular to come down like a ton of bricks if they find okapis and pangas from South Africa on the ship really was an eye-opener. And there's one thing South Africa learned. You can't try and please BRICS and the West and just be at the table. That was a turning point. And I end, Minister, particularly colleagues from the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Development. The high water mark of South Africa's 30-year foreign policy was what happened in December last year. Everybody was waiting for a bold state to take Israel on and report it. I certainly did not expect it to be my country and my republic. The consequences are going to be grave in the prices we're going to pay. Our minister is currently in some country there on the Western Hemisphere, some unimportant country called America, engaging Congress, men and women. So in a nutshell, I conclude on two notes. The world of human rights promotion is a world full of contradictions. It's how you do it. You are going to make mistakes. But to end with Ambassador Kingsley's question, can we restore our non-aligned posture? Can we promote both human rights and our national interests and self-interest? The question is undoubtedly yes, but there are three preconditions. One, have no doubt that we've entered a VUCA world, and you have to be constantly vigilant. Otherwise, you're going to make a mistake like Resolution 1973 by forgetting that that last clause that says by all means necessary means regime change. That's what it means. So in future, if we see that clause, you either, Minister, take the Tipex and take it out, or you abstain. Finally, here is the real challenge. Do we have the professional capacity? I say, and I shudder to say this, I was surprised by how, Minister Ramola, please don't call me aside after this, I was surprised by how the Polokwanization also impacted on our foreign policy. If we want to play this role of navigating the politics of interests and the politics of human rights and morality in our foreign policy, we have to build the state, rebuild the state, and for our purposes and for the purpose of this panel, restore the professionalism and the pride of the diplomatic corps and pursue a multi-stakeholder foreign policy where it's not just DIRCO that pursues this, but the relationship between Department of Justice, DIRCO, other departments is very important, but I have no doubt we can restore our credibility and we can restore our image as a country that believes in positive activist non-alignment. Thank you very much. That was 7 minutes.
More than that, Prof. Thank you very much. Prof, maybe other remaining two panel members as they come to the stage. It's really to address the question that some of these international institutions, take the ICC, without underwriting by big powers, are they likely to have teeth? 2 weeks ago, 2 generals from Russia were indicted by the ICC. No one has been indicted in Israel, despite the fact that close to 40,000 people, children, innocent women and children have been killed up to today. I know that debate around the Palestinian issue take place in the next session here. Let's reserve our question and interaction with that. How possible is it for this, within the current configuration of power, that these international institutions would have the power and the leverage to be impartial? Are they not used as instrument for weaker states to punish them? And how do we interface with them? Are they relevant? Are they becoming relevant? I hope you'd help us in terms of this question, Dr. Tong, next. But I think Dr. Tong also deal with the question of this multipolar that people are speaking about. How is the power distribution within the multipolar world? Are we going to continue to have those who are much more powerful wielding too much power, and those who are weaker, they'll remain weaker? How is the power distribution? Are we thinking about a power configuration where even the weaker have a veto power in terms of this configuration? How is it going to work? I know it's a research that is going on. You are perhaps involved in that. Share with us some of this idea as we move forward. Thank you.
I'm trained in international law, and my own focus and specialization is on rights of peoples. So you can imagine my excitement when South Africa took up the Palestinian case and went to the International Court of Justice, because that case essentially says somebody in the international system of human rights, in international law, need to think about people. Because the international system of law, it's really a system of agreed principles and rules between states and nations. They agree, states meet and agree and say, this is how we are going to relate with each other. That's in essence international law in that respect. But very often, in that tussle between the powerful, in the tussle between nations, the people sometimes get lost. And it is for that reason that I am especially excited about that. My own entry into international law comes about as a PhD student. I wrote about the people of the Chagos Island. A little bit of background. The Chagos Island is an island in the Indian Ocean. It's still a British colony. It has the biggest US military base outside of the US and the most expensive. The islanders that live there were former African states. A treaty was signed as per international law between the United States and the United Kingdom to say we shall cooperate to establish a military base here. The two states agreed to summarily take these little former African slaves and dump them in Mauritius. Mauritius happily accepted them in exchange for independence in 1976. Seychelles received some of these former African slaves, and they lived there, but they had to go through some process in order to ensure that they receive Seychelles citizenship. Deputy Minister Bottas, I'm hoping that South Africa will start to pay attention to the Chagos question. And the reason is as follows. Here are 4 states, United States, United Kingdom, Mauritius, and Seychelles involved in this big case. Currently, there's a running case between a dispute of sovereignty between Mauritius and the United Kingdom. Mauritius says the Chagos Islands are unfinished business of decolonization. The African Union supports them on this point. They are saying that Great Britain must hand back the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. What Mauritius conveniently doesn't say or address are the rights of the people of the Chagos Islands. In the year 2022, I facilitated a conference for the University of Johannesburg, the Institute for Pan-African Thought and Conversation. I was astonished to hear the ambassador of Mauritius at that conference refer to Chagosians as Mauritians of Chagosian origin. And I'm saying as South Africa, much as in the scheme of things of international law, while this big tussle happens about sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, South Africa needs to take a principled human rights approach, as we are doing in the case of Palestine, and fight for the people of the Chagos Islands. They remain colonized because they are citizens of a still colonized territory. They live in enforced exile until today in Mauritius, in the United Kingdom, and in Seychelles. And somebody needs to fight for those people and bring in the issue of peoplehood. As South Africans, we understand that it took us to be in the liberation movement, to fight in the liberation movement, and enter the United Nations system and eventually become a state. And I implore us, on the principle of global solidarity, to remember our path in that regard and take up the issue of the people of the Chagos to enable them one day to also become a country independent of Mauritius. And by the way, Mauritius is very complicit in their plight. Yet when it appears in international fora at the United Nations, it says it wants its territory. Who's speaking for the people? I also want to talk about Namibia. Tomorrow is Independence Day for Namibia. 21 March 1990, Namibia gained independence. From who? Apartheid South Africa, right? So as South Africans, for me, this therefore for me demonstrates, hey, that the foot is tapping too fast for me there. Ambassador, I have quite a lot to say. I'll try to rush up. So for me, the Namibian case Take Namibia, 1971. Okay, firstly, South Africa took up trusteeship of Namibia. Apartheid South Africa took up trusteeship of Namibia under false pretenses during the time of the League of Nations. In 1971, the International Court of Justice passed an advisory panel to say the continued presence of Namibia in South Africa, continued presence of South Africa in Namibia was illegal. It took many years, it took another 20 years for South Africa to eventually, apartheid South Africa, to eventually leave Namibia and allow Namibians to be an independent state. And therefore, and the reason I talk about Namibia, now in the International Court of Justice case, South Africa versus Israel, I was very heartened when Namibia was the first to raise their hands and say, we stand with South Africa on this question. So therefore, for me, I'm using this example in this case study to show that as a country, we've walked a path, a long path. Even if you divide it into apartheid South Africa and democratic South Africa. But Namibia is a case study that shows you nations that have found themselves on the wrong side of morality, international justice, can take choices and make choices and ensure that we make the choices that put us on a path that is favorable for all of humanity. Professor Landsberg, I agree with you and I agree with Ambassador as well, the program director. There will be, and Deputy Minister, as South Africans, we should not be naive about the price we will have to pay for standing up for Palestinians. But I hope that that doesn't discourage us and will propel us to continue on that path as well. I'm not able to cover all the points, but I'd like to speak on the point about the capacity of the state or DECO. I work for the University of South Africa. At UNISA, we are collaborating with DECO to see ways in which we could find ways in which, as the university, we can contribute to the training of diplomats, etc. We've had several symposia, one of them in October of 2023, where we had Ambassador Diseko speaking. And the discussion was South Africa's non-aligned posture. Advocate Mashabane, I saw you struggling this morning, just managing and ensuring people have enough time to speak. I can assure you this topic is going to be very difficult, Ambassador, to get everyone to be able to speak. But I'm happy to say that at UNISA we are continuing this conversation and we will host even more symposia where we will invite the public to come and debate with DECO on South Africa's own stance, on human rights, diplomacy, on all these matters. And that will be an opportune time to have more time to debate these issues. Today is simply not going to be enough to be able to discuss this. On this thing, on the question about how do you balance South Africa's human rights posture on the one hand and other interests as well. In August of 2023, we had the occasion at UNISA to host the African Bar Association conference. At that conference, one of the participants was the former president of the ICC, Judge Chile Eboye Osuji. I had the rare privilege to discuss this with him, and Ambassador Diseko knows I would have had word with her on the side about it. He asked this question: what do I think as an international human rights lawyer about South Africa's decision and how it handled the arrest warrant that was given against Putin, very specifically? He asked me this question. The foot is tapping for me to stop talking, and I'm just starting. Ambassador, on a lighter note. So when he asked me this question, it was because I had spent a lot of time talking to him about the Chagos case. And I was arguing that in the Chagos case, here is the US government ensuring that the British government keep the Chagosians in exile and don't return to their territory, because the US military policy is that the Chagos Islands, which they now call British Indian Ocean Territory, the biggest US military base there, Diego Garcia, the biggest, the US has decided in terms of its military policy that it should remain without a national civilian population. So the Chagosians are kept out of their territory, living in enforced exile, because one government said, I do not want a civilian population here, and the UK, do what you have to do to ensure that the Chagosians never return to their homeland. After speaking so passionately as a human rights lawyer to him about this case, he said, okay, what about South Africa's stance with Russia? Do you believe that South Africa should have allowed President Putin to come to BRICS? And do you believe that South Africa should arrest Putin? My answer was as follows, and this is where I agree largely with my dear Professor Landsberg. Human rights is just one aspect of our diplomacy and our international relations. And my answer was as follows. As South Africa, we were able to use diplomatic channels to address this issue so that we do not have a situation where President Putin comes to South Africa and South Africa has the obligation to arrest him. So this is essentially my point. Yes, I'm a human rights lawyer, and I will argue at every possible opportunity to ensure that the rights of people are protected. At the same time, when we talk international law and we talk international relations, we cannot only address one aspect. On the Palestinian question, we are moving because of global solidarity as a country, and we're supporting the Palestinians because of human rights. Ambassador is trying to stop me there. But I do believe that we need, when we look at these questions, to take a complete picture and look at the entire situation and say, as a country, when it becomes necessary, national interest needs to also be taken into account. Thank you.
Sorry, Doc. Doc, thank you very much.
Minister Lamula, Deputy Minister Porters, DM Jeffries, and other members of the executive that are present here, our moderator, my fellow panelists, dear friends and colleagues. I'd like to begin by thanking Minister Lamula, Advocate Mashabane in the Department of Justice and Constitutional Affairs for convening this conference. I am grateful for the invitation to participate. Underlying Deputy Minister Portes' remarks is that for South Africa, everything flows from the Constitution, a document, our Constitution, a document that embodies all of our rights, both civil and political, as well as social and economic. The Constitution, which is also founded on our history, is the genesis of our national interest. Human rights are intrinsic, inherent to the formulation and execution of our foreign policy. Not out there as things to be added and brought in, but inherent and intrinsic to the formulation of foreign policy. This, Ambassador Makubela, is in contrast to them being merely instruments of foreign policy. South Africa views human rights as underlying values for everything that we do, rather than primarily instruments of foreign policy. So I will focus on a question that was not asked by the program director, and that is the underlying context in which, or terrain in which South Africa pursues its foreign policy objectives, focusing largely on the global dynamics as they play themselves out in global multilateral institutions. An understanding of this is absolutely crucial in a context where I see a disjuncture between how domestically we are measured by commentators and pundits, and how well respected South Africa is amongst nations in the UN system on human rights. For example, Panim Tomboti, writing recently in a column in the Sunday Times on South Africa, assesses South Africa as follows, I quote, "In global terms, South Africa is an insignificant, floundering midget whose incompetent leadership is expected against logic to be taken seriously on the global stage." And then goes on to say, once we commanded respect, we are now a pariah state. From my experience, Mtombochi's astounding assertion is far from the reality of day-to-day international relations. The team at DECO I understand to be a formidable team that is very effective and highly sought after. Nothing in the UN system moves without South Africa. South Africa is currency and has currency, and its support is highly sought after. That is why we come under fierce criticism, because the struggle is to get South Africa in your corner, because if you don't, many other countries are going to say, we don't actually think we're going in the right direction. South Africa continues to lead many initiatives globally and in the UN system. So Advocate Mashabane, a key proposal I would make for work to be done going forward out of this conference is the need to create space for the understanding of the global politics of human rights, spins and narratives as we approach the review of the Human Rights Council, as it were. It is important that South Africa is clear on the kind of Human Rights Council it wants into the future, where Western countries are already ahead of us with clear views of what they want of the Human Rights Council. Such an understanding is also necessary because of the erosion and corrosion of human rights in Western countries by what is unfolding in Gaza. Accounts of which the ICJ deemed to be the basis of plausibly coming to the conclusion that a genocide is being perpetrated. As I speak in some European countries, while proclaiming to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, key universal legal instruments are being challenged, such as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Not only are there bans on public demonstrations in support of the Palestinian people, but free speech is being constrained with narrow redefinitions of what anti-Semitism is in order to absolve the state of Israel and give it a free pass when it comes to accountability. Suddenly, TikTok has become a major security threat in a country that championed a UN resolution on the enjoyment of human rights online at the Human Rights Council. In this case, national security interest, as clearly stated by lawmakers, trumps human rights and freedom of expression. Were South Africa to do the same thing, there would be an outcry immediately in the country. But we will not do that because we're not that kind of people. It has not escaped attention to many that Israel is unhappy about TikTok and that there is a connection between attempts to ban TikTok and the prevention of the exposure of atrocities in Gaza. Israel has to be held accountable. The battleground in human rights divides between those that believe that Israel as a state must be held accountable or not held accountable. Yet Israel was founded on a UN General Assembly resolution, the Partition Resolution 181, which was passed in 1947. On the 27th of February 2017, at the opening of the Human Rights Council, UN Secretary General Guterres said, "Human rights are an intrinsic part of all that we do and all that we are. And so, we must speak up for human rights in an impartial way without double standard. We must invest in human rights and recognize human rights as values and goals unto themselves, not allowing them to be instrumentalized as political tools." The significance of this statement for me is that it actually summarizes the context in which South Africa has had to actually has had to navigate in advancing its foreign policy objectives, particularly with matters pertaining to human rights. In a context where the Constitution of South Africa enjoins South Africa to be independent as a sovereign state, equal among nations on the international scene, and not as a lackey of other international, of big powers, as it were. Now, the reason why I'm saying, Advocate Mashabane, we do need this discussion about the politics of human rights is that when a report came out by Nikki Haley, criticizing South Africa for not being aligned to the United States of America, to the interests of the United States of America. There was fright, there was fear that was generated. People didn't go into the report to understand what was the report about. In essence, what that report was about the voting pattern of South Africa on Palestine and on racism. We're never going to agree with the United States on Palestine and racism. However, here domestically, the flag we got for that without going into the report to understand the politics of human rights was just incredible. Again, another example I will use is that when South Africa championed action in response to the killing of George Floyd in the United States of America, it was our media here that raised alarm and said, hey, South Africa is doing things that it ought not to be doing. And when that is being done, it says there are people who ought to be made accountable for human rights, but there are others that should never, ever, ever be held accountable for human rights. And apart from that, in responding to human rights issues, you must be instructed by powerful countries and not express yourself independently or respond in an independent manner. A greater part of the fight is that many of the things that are being proposed by our partners are based on national interest and national security interest, not so much on values. Where we disagree with our partners is that human rights to them are dispensable tools of foreign policy. 1 minute they want to have this supported. The minute you support it, they leave it, they go elsewhere, and they expect you to run with them. This was so clear with COVID, where the right to health was paramount, and they were telling us, no, it doesn't exist. Leave the private sector to do as it should do. The matter gets complicated, Ambassador. I'm going to summarize. When it comes to Africa, where human rights become mechanisms for intervening in peace and security processes of the African Union, to undercut the processes and decisions of the African Union, what Western countries do is to generate a human rights resolution. A good example, again, that I will leave you with as I close is South Sudan. The minute the South Sudan agreement, IGAD brokered agreement was concluded, already our partners, the Western countries, wanted an in-way in which they could get inside the process of the implementation of the IGAD peace agreement. The easiest way to do that is through human rights, forgetting that the agreement comprises of 7 chapters inherent in which, or contained in which, are human rights issues such as accountability. An accountability mechanism in Chapter 7 that is envisaged by the African Union, a hybrid mechanism, is not ideal for Western countries. They want their own kind of accountability mechanism that they can use to take out critical players that they do not want. And of course, I think for me, underlying all of this is what's underneath the ground in South Sudan. You know, many of the things that come up are things that are intended as economic tools, but prescriptions for African countries and developing countries. And when similar situations arise in the West, no action is taken. In fact, you dare not even suggest that action is taken. Between 2017 and 2021, in one particular country, human rights were upended in a very big way, with the head of state saying things that were shocking and frightful. I pointed out to my Western partners that there is a report on Burundi, which they insisted on having done, on the basis of which they established a mechanism, a report that the head of state of Burundi was inciting hatred, and therefore a process must be begun to take him to the ICC. I said to my colleagues from the West, if you redacted the name of the country between 2017 and 2021, a child at school anyway would be forgiven for saying This is not an African country, but a big developed country that we know of. How is it that that country cannot be held accountable, especially in matters of incitement to hatred that culminates in a rolling back of rights in the reshaping of the constitutional court of that country, that you find yourselves in a situation where women cannot even access basic rights that they thought were established. And African Americans are on a secure footing in relation to a status that they thought was already established in affirmative action. And as I speak, lawmakers are drafting laws in states to disenfranchise African Americans. How is it that that is not an issue of importance? So if you're going to judge South Africa taking into full account that the arena we play in is a particular arena where we come with the innocence that we have, that I like, of human rights as values, not as tools of foreign policy. We never say to a country, do this, if you don't, we'll do that. Nor do we go to institutions to create mechanisms to whip countries into line. Where fundamentally we differ with these countries is that on the issue of the right to self-determination, up until we got to Ukraine, they would tell us it doesn't exist. Yet the ICCPR and the ICER's two major covenants of human rights begin with the same clause on the right to self-determination, on the understanding that no one can ever enjoy any rights without the right to self-determination. But suddenly we get to Ukraine, the right to self-determination matters. And South Africa says, but is it going to matter when we come out of Ukraine? We're not getting those assurances. So these are some of the things that I hope would have to be discussed. And I would like to pay tribute to my colleagues. South Africa has capacity. Our diplomats are unmatched. They do incredible things. They really do incredible things. And they are highly sought after. They are brilliant. Their mastery for me is evidence that the ICJ is unparalleled.
Your Excellency delegates, I would have really wanted to have more time for you to interact with these presentations. The big problem, Minister Lamola and Deputy Minister Jeffries and DG, how are we going to finance all these human rights issues that people have correctly identified them at this conference? The global debt, it stands at $300 trillion US. $300 trillion US is the debt. And the global economy, it's $100 trillion. And it's likely going down. Are we, as a generation, I think I want the delegates as a raised question to factor this. Are we, this generation, all of us in this room, have we become gluttons? That we consuming or we solving today's problem with the wealth of future generations? Maybe DG, if you had to organize a mock trial that would happen 100 years later, that future generations will hold us to account about how we squandered their wealth. Organize that maybe with Prof here and the doctor here. It'll be interesting to see the results. How future generation would be harsh on us. South Africa, we are not even servicing, we haven't started to service our debt, we're paying the interest. And the Minister of Finance said we are likely not even to meet the threshold of servicing our interests. So these are our problems as we move forward. Can I then, I'm going to start entertaining questions. I'll start on my center left, but I'll take a question right at the back. Then I'll come back again on my far left, take a question in front, go back to my center right, take a question here, and to the far right, a question right at the back, and allow the panel to respond to these questions and make comments and hopefully conclude on time. No, I said to the back. On my center right, my center left, right to the back. Is there a question right to the back? Somebody should
Thank
please
you,
help
Program
me.
Director. My name is Bafana Dube from Azania Africa Initiative. We say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Let me interrupt you. The next session deals specifically with issues related to the Palestine, 2 sessions on that.
Okay.
Can we reserve that? If we have anything that has to do with that, let's reserve that for the next 2 panels.
Yes,
Please.
Program Director, however, your panelists have also interacted on the issue of Palestine.
No, I
But
don't
it's
dispute
fine,
that.
I understand you.
No, I don't dispute that. I'm saying we are likely to get more information. It will be much more helpful, and it will be better interactive if we were to reserve that. I'm not saying don't raise it.
Okay.
The Deputy Minister may have spoken to it or other people. Let's reserve that for the next panel, please.
Okay.
So that we don't
Well-
open up the discussion on the next panel now, before all this presentation that I know people have made very good arrangements for.
Thank
Please.
you. Thank you, Program Director. I just want to check with regards to the international relations issue. What is it that what is the position of the African Union with regards to the people of Western Sahara? And why is it that the South Africa cannot do what it did for Palestine to take Morocco to the ICJ? Those are the 2 questions that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me come to my far left in front here. I see there's a question there. Please. Yes, the hand there. I can't see. Please.
Oh, thank you. All protocol observed. On the 22nd to 24th of March 2023, there was the National Conference on the Constitution that was held at Galaga Estate. And I'm also mindful, appreciative of the fact that our Constitution is held in high esteem. Mindful of the inputs that were made at the Galaga Estate, the contributions, at that conference on the 22nd to 24th of March, and the need to scrutinize regional and international instruments overall, and their impact on ordinary citizens of this country. I'm just wondering from the presentations that have just been made, is it not about time that the South African foreign policy is subjected to the same or similar consultations on reflections and the road ahead in terms of the policy?
Thank you.
Would it not be appropriate to do that? And just a teeny weeny, also, this is said without prejudice, to ensure that such consultations on the policy, on the South African policy, are inclusive mainly of people at the grassroots level, instead of mainly being academic. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I come to my center right? I'll take a question in front here. Is there any question? If there's none?
Yeah,
Oh, which side? Are you from this side or this side? No, we come in that side. I want to accommodate people this side.
we not notice first.
Any question? If there's none?
I'm
the lady,
here.
The lady right at the back.
I'm here, Program Director.
The lady at, gentlemen. Yeah, please, sir.
Thank you very much. May I please ask the Deputy Minister to comment on the difference with which the Putin and Al-Shabaab cases were dealt with, and what informed that difference? Thank you.
Thanks very much.
My name is
Wait.
I'm here.
No. We're this side.
I raised
The
my hand
gentleman,
first.
no, please. I
Okay.
said we're going to start this way, we go this way, and we give people this chance. So I just want to ensure that everyone here, we're not looking at one side. Gentleman over here, please.
Thank you. My name is Zweli Ndaba from Sisonke People's Forum. All protocol observed. To the Deputy Minister, do you know about our cars that were hijacked from us that are easily crossing to Mozambique? Then what steps did you take about those cars and bringing back to us? Secondly, do the people of international knows that in South Africa we are having undocumented who are living freely so in South Africa? To the Prof. Chris and Dr. Maureen, what is the primary aims of this foreign policy? Because the treatment that we received when we visiting them is not human. Then I'm just want to find out the aims of this foreign policy. Thank you.
Good. Can I then give the gentleman who stood up there? Please, sir. And after that, we'll allow the panel to respond and come up with their concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director, for your
But the
generosity.
Program Director, I read.
Can we allow the gentleman here to speak?
Thank you, Program Director. Just wanted to find out from DECO, how are they assisting in terms of the issues of reparations? Because you know that the Nuremberg Council or the court that decided that reparation must be paid for enslavement of the people of Germany. But now when it comes to the Africans, no one is talking about reparation and repatriation. Our fellow African from diaspora, when they come here, they come through immigration laws, while we expected the country to take a direction that Ghana is taking, the door of return, where Africans are coming back home without having to explain themselves. Number two, how do we assist Congo because of its minerals, that it's been attacked and our politicians are there, but not for the interest of the people of Congo, but for the interest of their own interest, actually. So how do we assist the Congolese in their plight? Because it is the cobalt that is creating havoc with the people of Congo and the geopolitics as we experience them. And South Africa here at home, how do we help South Africa to maintain and respect human rights? Because currently we have the army that was instituted by our premier in Gauteng without following due law or processes. The Amapanyazas brutally beating our people for mere things that possession of cannabis, while cannabis has been freely given the right for every people to have a possession of the cannabis. How do we assist the country?
Thank you.
These are the issues.
Can we let everyone else respond, and maybe Deputy Minister, you can come right at the end to sum up. Doc, do you want to respond?
On the issue of reparations, I presume this refers to the genocide in Namibia that was committed by Germany. Rather than subject that to African instruments, Germany has tried to bilateralize that and resolve it with Germany between the two of them. And they're working out reparations. I think that is why Namibia was very upset when Germany issued a statement to the effect that it would defend Israel against a case. The second aspect to your question was about people of African descent, I think, diaspora, if I understood all of that. South Africa has done a considerable amount of work to ensure that the United Nations acknowledges people of African descent and the victims of the transatlantic slave trade. And systems and processes have been put in place. I think we're actually finishing the decade of people of African descent. Thanks.
Thank you. If I may also come back on the issue of reparations, it is my biggest argument on the for example, Ambassador spoke about Germany, but I'm also saying that the people of Chagos Islands are entitled to reparations. They've been removed, displaced, forced to live in exile by two powerful bodies in the world, two world powers, and they should be paying reparations to them. We also know that African Americans have been leading the cause and the argument to say that they're entitled to reparations for transatlantic slave trade, and I fully support the argument. Thanks.
Let me try and be crisp, not crisp. So let me answer the question that was, first the question was specifically asked to me. The primary aims of these foreign policies and our foreign policy. The primary aims of South Africa's foreign policy and that of any other country is to overcome the domestic challenges that the country faces, notably security, welfare or development, uplift these countries. And these, by the way, speaks to human rights. So to put it to you in a nutshell, what I would say is that as activists as we are on foreign policy matters abroad, I think we really have to also, sorry for the colloquial language, get our domestic house in order and serve the human rights of our own people. I think there's a lacuna there, but that's the primary objective of our foreign policy, and in particular of the current administration. I'm looking forward to see what administration will emerge on the 30th of May, but the current one, to overcome the triple helix of joblessness, unemployment, inequality, and may I add, national cohesion, non-racialism, unity, and building a unified state. That's the, let me just take one other one, Ambassador. There's a big debate that's going on about the future of Pan-Africanism. Should we pursue what I describe, and I've co-authored a paper with my student assistant, who's actually my boss, who's here today, is a continental approach and a continental African Pan-Africanist approach the right one and still relevant, Ambassador? Or should we go, and I'm looking forward to seeing the video that we couldn't hear earlier, or should we go for a global African approach? Because if truth be told, just like the Caribbeans were in the forefront of coining the very phrase Pan-Africanism, leading the charge from Henry Sylvester Williams, Blyden, W.B.E. Du Bois, Marcus Garvey, they are advocating for a new approach called global Africanism, and they are in the forefront of the reparations movement. We focus on Namibia, finally, Ambassador, but it's clear that there are skirmishes where Africans are becoming a bit bold to take on Western powers, and I like your example of Mauritius, right? I like that example. Was it Mauritius, right? And that's stateless people, but just look at how bold African countries from Nigeria, Senegal, North Africa are in saying to the colonizers, at the very least, return all our stolen artifacts. There's something that's happening in the world. The unbridled, unchallenged hegemony of the United States, in particular the West in general, I get the impression is waning, and the South, even though it's not always unified and speaking with one voice, but there's a newfound assertiveness and a shedding of timidity when it comes to the issue of reparations. In our case, sadly, we gave the former oppressors a soft landing. unlike the problems that Boeing has currently in America, right, with these turbulent landings. A soft landing. And we can agree that one of the mistakes we made, or problems, in hindsight, is that we were so focused on a political settlement, Ambassador, and rightly so, that we forgot the need for a CODESA, for an economic CODESA, but it may be only a matter of time that that will be put on the agenda. That's why I'm looking forward so much to see which coalitions emerge after the 29th.
No, thank you very much, Ambassador. I think my first response is obviously on what is the position of the African Union as it relates to the plight of the Saharaui people in the Western Sahara. You'll remember, ladies and gentlemen, the African Union as the key regional organization is subordinate in relation to decisions of, in particular, the United Nations Security Council, the UNSC, and the UN. And therefore, it underpins and upholds, ladies and gentlemen, the decision on a referendum that should be privileged to the Saharaui people, in order for the Saharaui people, ladies and gentlemen, to determine their choice on self-determination. That choice of self-determination is a mirror image, for example, to the choice of self-determination as it relates to the people of South Sudan and Sudan. If we look at it from historical optics, the major problem of Morocco, ladies and gentlemen, is that when Spain, as the colonial authority in 1969, decided to forego its colonial territories, it unilaterally ceded the territory of the Saharaui people to the Kingdom of Morocco. And that is the difficulty that we have, obviously, because self-determination is premised on the fact that people themselves, exercising their human rights, their universal suffrage, are able to determine their own future. So it's actually an antithesis in terms of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So that is the first issue. The second issue, ladies and gentlemen, that we just want to crystallize is that the SADC intervention in the DRC, remember in the DRC, it's a conflict that has come from 1996. You would recall the Lusaka engagements, the inter-Congolese dialogue as championed and anchored by President Mbeki at that time. The main difficulty with the conflict in the DRC, ladies and gentlemen, it's not the interstate conflict. So it's not a conflict between different states. You would recall that the DRC are bordered by 9 different countries. The major difficulty in the DRC is an intrastate conflict that are fueled by one prominent non-state actor in the form of the M23 movement. Our value proposition, embedded in the Constitution, centralized the issues about peace diplomacy. Now, peace diplomacy have 2 key tenets, ladies and gentlemen. It speaks about de-escalation. It speaks about cessation of hostilities, and it's then underpinned by negotiations, mediation, and dialogue. And the intervention of SADC, it's exactly the same intervention that SADC have made in the northern part of Mozambique, in Cabo Delgado, where there was an insurgency. The last issue, ladies and gentlemen, that I want to address someone asked, what is the difference between how South Africa handled the issues of the ICC warrant to President Putin, vice versa the ICC warrant to President al-Bashir? The central topology, ladies and gentlemen, because it was Antonio Gramsci that said, to tell the truth is revolutionary, isn't it so? The central topology has been leadership. You have a leader in the form of President Ramaphosa. You have the leader in terms of the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, which stood firm to codify the principles of international law and our signatory to the Rome Statute. That is the unequivocal substantive truth that has happened, is that when the Deputy President who chaired the Inter-Ministerial Committee, the IMC, on behalf of Cabinet as mandated by the President, raised a question, what stands us to do, given the indictment of the ICC, in relation to President Putin coming to the BRICS summit? The leadership, ladies and gentlemen, spoke truth to power. So you had your Minister of Justice that spoke truth to power, taken the leadership of the country into confidence that, Uguti, on this matter, we are not able to flout international law. We are not able to be in conflict with our own constitution, and therefore the only option available to the presidency in South Africa was to engage in unique diplomatic mastery. So that is the issue, ladies and gentlemen. It's a central topology of leadership, and I want to say, Ambassador Kingsley, because of that leadership that has been so systematic, that has been substantive, you are unlikely to see a coalition government beyond the 29th of May. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Let me, on your behalf, thank our panelists. And we're going to the next round of the discussion. The discussion continues. There's another presentation that we would.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Ambassador of Palestine and the embassy staff, allow me to express our sincere appreciation and heartfelt gratitude to the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development for kind invitation. We wish you the success of the esteemed conference and to achieve of its goals. The Foreign Secretary Balfour Declaration 1917, that document led the groundwork for Israel creation, granted a land of Palestine, which it did not own, to Zionist movement to establish a national home. And this represents the first international violation of human rights of the Palestinians who exist in this land, whether Jews, Christian, Muslims, for 1,000 years, and establish one of the first civilization in the world. Our people have paid and still paying heavy price as the result of the declaration and the support of Western power in general to assist the existence of Israel in 1948. We call it the first Nakba. Nakba, an Arabic word, means in English catastrophe. That time, the Zionists uprooted more than 70% of our people from their homes, destructing more than 53 villages and towns, committed more 50 massacres against civilian people, and occupying more than 70% of Palestinian territories. Followed by hundreds of massacres that continue to this day. Since 7 of October, barbaric army killing in Gaza Strip and West Bank, one child every 15 minutes, and 60 women every day, totally more than 150 Palestinian. And they continue destroy homes and holy sites, include historic mosques and churches, as well as educational institutions and hospitals. Also, lock access to service, food, and medication. Two-thirds of population in Gaza Strip lost their homes. Ladies and gentlemen, the state of Palestine, with its leadership and people, highly appreciate South Africa's historic and brave initiative, as South Africa undertook on itself to be legal opponent to Israel in the International Court on behalf of Palestinian people in matter that does not directly concern them. With this step, South Africa has awakened the global consciousness following the failure of all political efforts to halt the daily atrocity and war crimes against our people. The decision of International Court of Justice marks a victory of international law against barbarism, restoring confidence in the international legal system. This is marked the first time an international court has issued legally binding decision against the apartheid state of Israel. South Africa has shattered Israeli culture of international impunity. We thank all the loyal South African soldiers who stood in the court to defend what His Excellency Sir Ramaphosa said, that our cause has become the cause of South Africa, not only the Palestinian alone. As well as on behalf of the thousands of martyrs, we salute His Excellency President Sir Ramaphosa with the ruling party government, especially Honorable Roland Lamola and Honorable Naledi Pandor. This is the evidence of the principle of the South African people and the ruling party with the progressive political powers, with and strong relation that brought together our two people. Our historical relation start in 1956. It's not in 7 October, as some media mentioned. And it's launched between fighters from both sides. We affirm that South Africa is writing honorable chapter in the history today. On the other hand, this is the evidence of South Africa's respect and commitment to human rights, and our people support South Africa's efforts to reform the international system and end double standard to achieve justice for all oppressed people. Ladies and gentlemen, Amnesty International and the Human Rights Watch confirm that in their report that Israel is an apartheid state as well as the Anglican Church in South Africa recently declared that Israel is an apartheid state. Also, B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization, released report confirmed that Israel is an apartheid state not only against our people, but against their citizens as well. We appeal for international community to put pressure on Israel to stop the barbaric war and to label Israel as apartheid state. We believe that the military and security solution will not bring security and peace to anyone in the Middle East region. We will not, and no one will enjoy stability without achieving all demand of Palestinian people of freedom and return of Palestinian refugees to their home, referring the international resolution, especially 149 for returning people, and the resolution of Secretary General number 242, and resolution of General Assembly 181. As we wish democratic South Africa to achieve more progress and prosperity, and to secure a bright future for the children of beloved country, we affirm that strong South Africa is a strong Palestine and international solidarity. Thank you.
Hi.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, my name is Twana Makhoka. I actually have a question directed towards Prof. Viljoen about the African Court's decision in 2022 about Western Sahara and its right to self-determination of the Sahrawi people. As we know, they affirmed the right of the Sahrawi people to obtain assistance in their struggle for freedom from foreign occupation, but fell short in terms of prescribing the actual content of the collective duty of AU member states. So I was wondering if you could perhaps offer some ideas about what that could look like, and then secondly, if Africa had to advance our understanding of this collective duty around the right to self-determination, how could that address unresolved questions around the right to self-determination on the international stage? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Gentleman there to my left. Do you have the mic?
Thank you very much. My name is Sello Hlobelo. My question is on the issue of Palestine. I just want to find out, now that Israel is defying the decision of the ICJ, why is the matter not being taken to the Security Council? Though we know that the ICJ decisions are not enforceable, but I think the matter should be taken further rather than just folding our arms and looking the other way. And then secondly, why was this matter not taken to the ICC? Because the ICC decisions are binding and enforceable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those are the 4 questions. Thank you very much. And I think we can give ourselves a big round of applause for good behavior. May I invite the speakers that are here and the panelists, including the previous panel members, should they wish to respond to some questions, please indicate, especially around the issues of Palestine. They might just want to do so. Any takers on the first, second, third, fourth question? Please.
Thank you very much. I think one stands between people and their lunch, so maybe not to do a long answer, but to acknowledge that the African Court received the case, and the case essentially contested the right, the issue of the self-determination of the Sahrawi people, the people of the Western Sahara. It was brought, interestingly enough, against those states that have made the direct access declaration that we talked about earlier. So it was brought not against Morocco, because Morocco is not a state party to the African Charter, but against those states that admitted Morocco back into the African Union, saying that Morocco's re-entry into the African Union constitutes a breach of a fundamental principle of the African Charter, which is the right to self-determination. And I think the African Court was quite sympathetic to the self-determination leg of that argument, that if one looks at the very long decision that the African Court had given, that it pronounces itself in ways that I think one can build on in subsequent cases. But to just for everyone's notice then to say that this case was not successful, but for relatively procedural reasons, because the court could not ultimately hold those 7 states alone responsible for what the African Union as a whole had done, namely to readmit the state of Morocco back into the African Union. So I think it remains an issue of great contestation, and clearly the mere fact that Morocco was allowed back into the African Union for many is a clear violation of that substantial value that on which the African Charter is based, but obviously geopolitical and other concerns played a part in countries' decisions to vote in favor of Morocco, and it brings us maybe back to that paradox and difficult area between law and politics. But I'll be happy to engage personally further on the issue that you further alluded to. Thank you so much.
Please come along, Doctor.
Thank you very much for the floor again. I think I have one question that has been asked by the lady whose name is close to mine. She asked if countries, whether the Commission engages countries in the process of ratification. And I want to answer this from my experience of working in the African Union in another capacity, not as a commissioner, but as the Director General for Women in the African Union for 10 years. During that time, we had to go through the process of 20 ratifications, which is also a record in the Union. And I want to tell you that the process of ratification is a very exhaustive process, because member states look at the Charter, and then they look at their laws, and then they go through all stages, they go through Parliament, they consult, and sometimes reservations come out of that process. So in the case of South Africa, I think the fact that the ratification came soon after independence, I think benefited from the process of fighting for the struggle process. And so I think one can say that the engagement that the country went through as it was going through fighting apartheid and looking at human rights from the African Charter as something that really aligns with what they were struggling with, I think that tells you that I think for South Africa, it was much easier than some countries. And of course, becoming independent when other countries have been independent, I see the urgency of a new state, a new independent country, not wanting to be left behind. So I want to assure you that the process is very rigorous, and we engage the member states from the beginning to the end. Some sign, and then they ratify later. And during that period, we also engage them. So I just want to assure you that ratification is a very exhaustive process, and at member states level, there is a lot of consultations. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me check with the Chargé. Would you want to come through? So as you do, I think it should be stated that the approach to the Security Council is likely to produce any, I wouldn't hold on or have hope of any outcome that could take this issue any further. Given the composition of the Security Council itself, it's very likely, it's very unlikely that a outcome that you may wish for can be expected of the Security Council. But let me give to Mr. Besat.
Thank you, Chair. I will respond for question number 4. Since 7th of October, there is many countries try to issue a decision from there, but always they faced the veto of America. This is the problem of the Security Council, is the control of America. For example, when the Israeli committed the Rashid Street atrocity, when they killed more 100 Palestinians, they came to receive donation, some flour, not for making bread, not something dangerous. And they injured more 1,000, killed 100, more 110, then injured 1,000. Algeria tried to issue a statement from the Security Council. The Americans refused because they don't want that statement include that holding Israel responsibility in this massacre. So this is the double standard. The world is controlled by double standard. Then, firstly, South Africa went to the ICC, as you remember, with 5 countries, but South Africa led them. And nothing happened in ICC. They, until now, they didn't respond for without any reason. So, but when the American and West went to the ICC to issue arrest warrant for Putin because he kidnapping kids. But now, Netanyahu every 15 minutes killing one child, every 15 minutes. But there's no sense in ICC. This is the problem. That's why South Africa went for ICJ at the last chance or at last choice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serge. What is left of me now is to thank the panelists. I must say that you have made my task a lot more easier than I anticipated, especially at this hour. I also want to thank the DG.
Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: African politics, economy, and increasing power. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.
Tell us what you think in the comment section. Like and share the video, and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our African videos. It's the best way to support us.